Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever and however you're listening to the podcast, we appreciate that you are. This is the Delaware High School Football Pod presented by Websites for Sports, and we're the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to high school football in the first state. The pod is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and also on YouTube for those who prefer to see what you're listening to. Follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and on Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. On today's show, we recap last week's action, or this past weekend's action, I should say. We talk about our top performers, top performances. We preview next week's big games, a lot of big games on slate. We have our weekly trivia question. And something new this week, we're going to give you our thoughts as we approach the midway point of the season on who we think the top dogs are in each of the three classes. But first, again, our title sponsor of the Delaware High School Football Pod is Websites for Sports. That's websites, the number 4sports.com, the only place you can find the schedule of every high school and even most middle school teams in Delaware. Brian Rutter started this site more than 15 years ago. I actually was on it looking up something from 2010 just this week for the podcast. And I'm not sure what we did without it. It has a schedule of all the teams, as I mentioned, tells you the home team, the away team, where the game's being played. And if you click on where the game's being played, it pops you right into a Google Maps app so you can get the directions right there. Also has coaching staff names and contact information if you would need that, and the rosters of the teams. Sometimes numbers, heights, weights, sometimes not, but at least the names of all the players. And my favorite feature is that you can click on the yellow box on the homepage of the website and you can personalize it so you get updates when the schedules you're following changes. That's huge for my family and anybody who's playing sports. All right, so the bottom line is if you've got a kid playing sports, or even if you're just a fan, Websites for Sports, that's websites, the number 4sports.com is your place that you need to be. All right, Marty, want to do a couple house cleaning things first. As we are taping Sunday morning, the Charter Dickinson game was the one game that was postponed. I believe that was the only game that was postponed.
Yep.
And that'll be played on Tuesday. The DIAA is not big on Sunday games. And Yom Kippur, I believe, is the holiday on Monday. So schools basically are not allowed to play on that day. And I get that.
Yep.
But here's a teaser for my random thoughts. I have an opinion about the Sunday games, and we'll cover that when we get there. Second housekeeping item, we did find out officially from head coach Dave Collins of Hodson that Jace Hawkins will be out for the season with a torn ACL. And we just want to wish him the absolute best. Marty, this is a kid that I think it was the Caravel game I was watching. That's when he got hurt. The Howard game the week before, I was texting you and telling you how impressed I was with this kid, and I couldn't wait to watch him throughout the season. And unfortunately, he went down in the Caravel game, tried to come back, and went down again. And I'm not sure the particulars, of all that. But The bottom line is it was in the Caravel game when he tore his ACL and is out for the season. So just a shame. A great player. Don't know him as a kid. Not going to try to pretend that I do. But a great player who would have been fun to watch.
It's a shame because now he's the third player, a top-notch player. We had, of course, Jace goes down. We had Jonathan Tyndall with Lake Forest, and of course Daniel McConney with Appoquinimink. I don't remember a year where we had so many top guys go down so early in the season. I hope that's a trend that stops quickly.
Yeah, I hope that's it. And I hope our housekeeping items don't include any more major injuries. All right, season start, or the week, I should say, week 3. Again, the fourth week of the season, week 0, 1, 2, 3. This is week 3 that just finished up, started on Thursday night. And there were only 2 games, Marty, and I thought they were going to be great games. It was going to be St. Mark's at Red Lion. So you've got a Class 3 team who kind of resisted going up to Class 3. You've got a Red Lion team coming off a big win. Thinking, this is might be our year, playing up a class to their credit. And then you had Christiana and AI, not 2 powerhouses, 2 teams that, let's be real, are not going to probably be in the playoffs. But because of that, I thought it would be a great game. And so the great games went to fantastic flops. I came up with that term. That was my big thing to do on Thursday night after these games ended. St. Mark's rolled 29-0. Over Red Lion, and Christiana rolled 34-6 over AI. Congratulations to Brian Wood on his first win of the season. But Marty, not a good start to the week of football, week 3. I thought these were going to be 2 great games. They weren't even close. I was going to go to Red Lion. I got hung up doing some stuff here at home and didn't go, and I was never more thankful that I didn't, because I would have left at halftime. And again, nothing against Red Lion. They're playing up a class, the Class 3, and it certainly did not make or break their season. But just two games that I thought were going to be fantastic games for different reasons. Two pretty good teams with playoff aspirations in each of their classes, and two teams probably without playoff aspirations looking to pick up a win that, they might not get otherwise, and just was not two games at all.
No, it's just a kind of a wah kind of weekend. You go to sit down and somebody pulls the chair out from under you. Yeah, it was a terrible start. I think I tweeted that it was just not pretty for the first Thursday night games of the week. Just it was brutal. And we'll get into talking about the Apo St. George's game specifically. But yeah, I love the Thursday games. But man, I you want to see more. You want to see more competitiveness on Thursday night.
All right, St. Mark's, they're 2-1. They've got 4 home games in a row. They're going to host Caesar Rodney High School, which is 0-3. They were off this week, so they at least had a weekend to recover, maybe re-strategize after starting off 0-3. Red Lion falls to 2-2. They're at Concord. Of course, that means you're playing on Saturday morning at 10:30, which is unusual for most teams. Even the earliest games around here up in the Newark area, who plays on Saturday mornings, is at 11 o'clock. Christiana's 1-2. They're going to host Charter School of Wilmington. And again, that's a school that plays on Tuesday, so it's going to be a short week for them. AI also has a team coming off a short week because Charter School of Wilmington plays Dickinson, and that's who AI has. Now, that AI game against Dickinson is going to be, right now, it's two teams without a win. AI is 0-4, Dickinson's 0-2. Not sure what they'll do on Tuesday, but that would be a significant reason to kind of pay attention with some sort of interest in those games. We pay attention to the powerhouses, but I also like to pay attention to the teams that are trying to win their first game and knowing they're only going to win a couple, whether that would be it or not.
Yes.
So,
and it's funny, just real quick to finish up on the Thursday games. There's something off with Red Lion this year, and I can't figure out what it is, but their offense is just not in sync this year. And they got off to a kind of a slow start last year and then made a run at the end to the playoffs. And hopefully Ken Anderson and his guys are going to be able to do that. I was shocked that they weren't able to get a point against St. Mark's, St. Mark's defense that kind of has struggled at times. But really came up big on Thursday night. And it's a huge win for Joey Wright and his guys. Not necessarily because of the 2A thing, but just because they needed some momentum. They're now 2-1. They've recovered from the St. George's loss. And for Red Lion, it was just kind of Evan Budinger's a great player, but there just seems to be, something's off. There's no in sync with that offense right now. So hopefully they get that figured out.
And I'm not saying this is the reason, but I should have mentioned, I meant to mention Ramirez, their big running back, was out. He got hurt early in the game. And so that certainly doesn't help you. And I'm not sure of his injury status. But again, I agree with you. I think there's just something off. The week before, Evan Budinger was 0-for-8.
Yeah.
About under center. And he's a good quarterback.
He is.
So anyway, just I agree with you. The offense is just not clicking like you would think against these teams where it has to click if you're going to stay in these games. So, all right, I was on Friday night. A lot of games got pushed to Friday night. Some games, especially downstate, got pushed to earlier times with Ophelia that came in and is still here as we record on Sunday morning. So I was at Appoquinimink, and they won 19-14 over St. George's. Marty, I had seen St. George's play Hodson the week before, but I'll be honest with you, I was paying more attention to Hodson at the time. Right. And I didn't notice if that was the case here, but at Appoquinimink, so the quarterback for St. George's is Francis McCarthy. The running back is Cam Montgomery, if you were watching the game either online or there, he left the field on crutches. Basically, after the game had been decided, St. George's was on their last drive and et cetera, et cetera. Talked to Coach Wilson the next day. He's always great about getting back to us, and we appreciate that. And he said, good news, it's a sprain. So meaning that it's not worse. He's going to be out a week. He'll be a game time decision in their next game, but that was good news for them. But my point being, it just seemed that Francis McCarthy and Cam Montgomery ran the ball 80% of the time. And it reminded me kind of the Daniel McConomy days last year when he ran the ball 80% of the time of the plays. And again, it worked for Appoquinimink last year. They won the Class 3 District 1 championship. Can't argue with that. And so it just seemed like they were a two-man show. They did, they threw some balls to people and things like that. But that was another reason I was glad for St. George's sake that Montgomery is healthy, because that would have been a huge loss, much like McConomy being hurt for Appoquinimink, a huge loss, even though Jared Glover has stepped up and done more than his share for the Appoquinimink team. But for Appoquinimink, again, they had no McConomy. Glover stepped up. They had three starters who were game time decisions. Greg Nielsen, the quarterback, Dylan Griffin, the star secondary guy, but also one of the top 3 receivers, and Tyler Shane, who's a monster on defense. This kid, if you haven't seen him play yet, he sticks out, and not because he's big. He's probably, I know he's not 6 feet tall, and he probably doesn't weigh $170, but he plays like he's 6'4" and weighs 235. He's just one of those kids that every coach dreams to have. He seems to be in on every play. So anyway, they were potentially missing those 3 guys from injuries that were suffered the week before. Fortunately, all 3 played, and all 3 played well. But it wasn't over till the end. Apo defense had to come up big. They had to stop St. George's, and they did. But it was a good win for Appoquinimink. As Coach Timpson said to one of the media outlets afterwards, I think it was Kevin Tressolini who was there covering the game. He said, "This is a good win for our program because it's the first time in 3 years that they've had to go into a week of practice knowing their star running back is not available for the rest of the season, most likely."
Yeah, I was surprised at this, actually. I would have picked St. George's to win this game because it oftentimes, when the star player goes out, it takes a team a little time to adjust and decide how to distribute the ball. And it didn't happen here. I thought Jaden Glover was great. What did he have? 127 yards on 24 carries. Greg Nielsen, it's funny, you and I were talking about him last week. He's not a big kid at all. And it kind of reminds me of the situation with Drew Brees, where he had to like kind of crane to look over the line at times. If you look at some of the pictures that have been taken of some of the games with Greg Nielsen, he kind of does the same thing, and it works. Because he's able to find these guys, the receivers, a 35-yard touchdown pass. It's funny, him and Dylan Griffith both were questionable going in. They hooked up for a 35-yard touchdown, which I believe it came on 3rd and 20 was the situation at the time. Yeah, this was a huge win, I thought, for Appoquinimink, because it is the first time they haven't had Run DMC back there, somebody that if they get in trouble, you can rely on him and just hand him the rock and let him do his thing. I thought everybody stepped up tremendously. I thought the defense was great. I thought the offensive line was fantastic. This was just, it just looked like it's funny. It almost looked like a different Appo team to me. I don't know if it was a different mentality of, okay, I've got everybody on the line, everybody in the backfield, everybody on the team had to say, okay, I got to give an extra 10% to make up for what we're missing here. And that's what it was. And this was to me, it was a big loss for St. George's, because I think going in, you look at this as an opportunity and say, okay, we're playing a team without their best player. We've already beaten St. Mark's. And, we can come in here and get this win. We're coming off the loss to Hodgson, and it just didn't happen. But it was a well-played football game, I thought. And again, I just couldn't be more impressed with the Appo kids and the coaching staff and the adjustments they made to make this happen. This is, again, to me, this was a huge win for Appo.
Yeah, the defense really came through. Edge Von Brandt led the team with 18 tackles. He's got 44 tackles through the first 3 games of the season. And his brother, Leighton, who is the freshman, who is, he's the kid who's 6'8". He sticks out, unlike Tyler Shane. This kid sticks out. And he played almost every play, both sides of the ball. The only plays he missed that I remember is when he limped off the field. He had to come off because they stopped the game because he twisted his ankle or did something, but he was right back on. So this kid is going to be fun to watch.
If you did a mashup of every time the announcers say Von Brandt during a game, you'd probably get about 50 to 70 of them.
It's a good thing it's not a drinking game.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny because the first time I hear it, you lock in because that name is so distinctive, and all of a sudden you hear it again and again and again. It's like, man, these kids are everywhere.
And you're going to hear it later in the show. There's a little teaser there as well. All right, Appoquinimink moves to 2-1. They're heading to Smyrna. And Marty, it's Smyrna's home opener.
Oof.
Smyrna is 0-3, which we'll talk about in a second. And I tell you, there's probably, but here's the good thing if you're Appo. Nobody expects you to win. Go in, play loose, and have fun. And enjoy the atmosphere. That place is going to be packed.
Oh,
and I told the Appo fans when I signed off, as I do every week as the public address announcer, hey, we need to see you in Smyrna. Half that stadium's ours if we want it to be, and it's 10 minutes away. So come down and watch it. That is going to be, it's going to. Here's what it's going to be. It's going to be a gauge game for both teams. I think does Appo still have enough to make a run for the state championship, and does Smyrna still belong where they do in the rankings in the conversation we're going to have later on? So I think this is a big game for both teams.
I do too. And it makes the win for Appo over St. George's that much bigger, because if they lose that game and then they go into Smyrna and get blown out or just lose in general, they're in trouble. So I think that they're in a perfect position right here. And we'll talk about the South Smyrna game next, but Yeah, Smyrna, as you and I both know, we've seen them. They fill that place, and it's going to be loud.
And it's
They're
going
going
to
to be
be
fired
red,
up.
and it's
Yep.
going to be red and white.
Yes, it is.
So the other game between St. George's, so these two teams that we're talking about, they're 1-2. They're going to William Penn. William Penn is 3-0, but Marty, William Penn is 3-0 against Caesar Rodney, a team from out of state that's not that good. And whoever they played last week, it escapes me their third game. It was a Class 2 team, I think. Was it
Yeah,
Lake Forest?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You know what? I don't have it in front of me either, but yeah, it was not. They haven't played a great schedule thus far. It's one of those situations where this also feels to me like another gauge game. One of these teams is going to come out in a really strong position or a stronger position for a 3A playoff berth. The other one, even though William Penn has the 3 wins, they start to get into the tougher competition. That's where things start to, everything starts to shake out a bit. So I think this is a big game for both teams.
Was it Milford? They beat William Penn?
It was Milford.
That's what I thought. Okay. I knew it was a Class 2 team, but a decent Class 2 team.
Yes.
So anyway, my point being, and again, we'll have this conversation later when we talk about each classes. It's, St. George's and William Penn are going to be on the fence come playoff time. And this will be a big game that one of them will be glad that they won if they make the playoffs, and maybe look back at as if we had won that game, we might have made the playoffs. All right, let's move on to Sally's and Smyrna. Sally's comes away with a 28-12 win. Marty, I would have lost a lot of money on this one. Only with no lack of respect to either team. But I just thought Smyrna 0-2 coming to play their first Delaware team, even though it was an away game for them up at Abyssinia. I just thought that they would maybe not run away with it, but at least come away with the win. But I think what that tells you is it tells you how prepared Coach Gene Deladon has his team. It snapped a 5-game winning streak for Smyrna over the Sal's. And I heard Deladon interviewed after the game, and he talked about, he told his seniors, he said, look, you guys have not beat this Smyrna team yet. And this might be your last chance, because we might not see them in the playoffs, and we might not see them in a championship for one reason or another. And so it was the first time that the senior class won. Smyrna now 0-3, as we said, but you know what? They're not out of it. 0-3 means nothing, and I use this example back when Caesar Rodney in their heyday, their goal was to win this Cape Ann Open North, so they got the automatic bid. And Smyrna's goal is to win District 2 in Class 3A so that they get the automatic bid, and then they'll go from there.
Yes. Just real quick, a housekeeping thing. William Penn did not play this week. They racked up their 3 wins over the first 3, 0, 1, and 2. So just so people listening know that William Penn did not play this week. They beat Milford last week. They're off until the 30th. But for this game, I was shocked at this. This felt like the first time to me where Smyrna needed to pick a quarterback to go with. I thought both did okay, but it seemed like they could never get into a rhythm. And, Paul Warlow, of course, is the defensive coordinator for Sally's right now. They came up with a phenomenal game plan here. I thought offensively, Gene, and defensively, Paul did a great job of calling this. They just had Smyrna on their heels all game long. The Sal's, we talked about when he got hired, everybody thought, well, Gene's going to come in here and they're going to throw the ball over the yard. They're capable of it, but he's using it more of an extension again of the running game. 214 rushing yards for Sally's, 157 passing yards, 371 total yards against a Smyrna defense. You just don't see that too often. But the fact that the Sal's defense completely shut down Smyrna, and I thought, on some of the deep passes and even some of the mid-range passes, the Sally's defensive backs were step for step. They were all over the Smyrna kids. And it just seemed like it looked like a more athletic Sally's team than we've seen in the past, than we're used to seeing. They're usually big kids, and I'm not saying Gene took over and all of a sudden things changed like that, but it just seemed like the athleticism was more on display in this game. And, somebody texted me during the game and said, what do you think of Smyrna? I mean, they look terrible. Is this the end? I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, we've seen this movie before from Smyrna. In fact, we saw it last year when they lost to Middletown in the beginning of the season. And I remember the quarterback, Wright, had a terrible showing in the first 3 games of the season. And then he ends the season on like a 9-game win streak and ends up being one of the top quarterbacks in the state. These guys are good. Drew Marks is good. Tiberi is good. They've got the weapons. They're gonna. If anybody out there thinks that Judy and Marks are not going to figure this out, they're crazy. They are going to figure it out. But this was a monster win for Sally's for confidence reasons more than anything. Now, standings, obviously, it's a big deal too. But I think for Gene and his kids, the buy-in, the new program, the new coaches, the new system, it works, and it works well. I mean, it never felt like Smyrna was in this game. It just every time they came out, and again, they for anyone who doesn't know, they alternate quarterbacks every series. So it's Drew Marks one series, Jacob Tiberi the next series. They've excelled in those roles to this point in the season, but just couldn't get a rhythm going against Salesianum. And again, it just feels like it's a huge win for Sally's. I don't think it's a huge loss for Smyrna, as crazy as that sounds, as you and I have talked about. It just feels like another learning experience. And, Judy and Marks are going into the lab. They're going to get it all figured out when they come out by mid-season. This is going to be a team that is as good as any they've had. So, but a great game for Gene. I was happy for him. I texted him or communicated with him on Saturday night. And, I said, just a great win for his seniors more than anything else. Yeah. Again, like you said, this was their only chance to beat, most likely their last chance to beat Smyrna. And they did it. They came out and they played their game. I'll tell you what, John, I don't know how he was being used at DMA, but BJ Aline is a monster on the field. My goodness. It looks like it takes 5 kids to bring him down every time. 169 rushing yards, 2 rushing TDs. Ryan Storr, 11 of 23, 157 yards and a touchdown. Jacob Urban had that huge 45-yard fumble recovery TD that I thought really turned the tide of that game. So it was a fun game to watch because you watch Smyrna and you think they're going to explode at any second. And Sally's it kept it from happening. The fuse would be lit and they'd put it out every time Smyrna got the ball. And it just a great win for Salesianum. And I'm curious to see how Smyrna responds to this, what changes, if any, they make. Right. Because again, last year I made the mistake of thinking, oh, I see this team and there's mistakes here. I know what I would do. Well, guess what? That's why they have this job and you and I are doing this. They're going to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, and this could be the 3 toughest games they play all season could be behind them now.
Yes.
3 toughest teams, I should say. We don't know that. We'll find out. But when you look at their schedule, they still got Appo, still got Dover, still got other, class teams, good teams. But they, you could realistically look back on their season at the end of this season and say, hey, we started out with the 3 toughest opponents we had all season, and that helped us on the run. And that's why Mike Judy does this schedule this way. He could play anybody out of state. He could go blow 2 teams out, one in New Jersey, one in Maryland, and one in Delaware if he wanted to, but he doesn't. He wants his kids tested. And they were tested. They didn't score to the 4th quarter, which I read about that, and that shocked me that they didn't score to the 4th quarter.
When the 3rd quarter ended, I was watching the game and I'm thinking, my God, they still have a 0 on the board. Right. That is just incredible for them. But it's funny. I said last week, it's the Stan Waterman school of scheduling where, Stan was the Stanford basketball team. He wouldn't care if they went 0-10. They're playing these top teams in Florida, Arizona. When the season started in Delaware, they just mowed everybody down because they had seen the best and they knew what to expect.
And the other good thing for this win for Sally's is, like I said, Smyrna could run the tables, which means they're going to get the bonus points, Sally's is, for beating them. And so, and when you start ranking, it's not going to get Sally's in the playoffs. They're going to be in the playoffs no matter what, but it could get them in a spot that they want better than if they had lost to Smyrna. All right, Sally's is going to Dover. Huge game for both teams, not necessarily, again, for playoff circumstances. I think they're both in the playoffs, but it's going to give both teams a gauge as to where they are in that top 4 tier, and it's going to give the fans a gauge as to where they are in the top 4 tier. Both teams 3-0. That's at Dover. And then Smyrna is going to play their first home game, as we mentioned, against Appoquinimink, and we've already talked enough about that game. All right, another game downstate. DMA traveled back downstate for the 2nd time this year, and they took on Sussex Central, a game, Marty, that interested me as a gauge game, and it gave me a little bit of a gauge. I think DMA is legitimate in Class 2. I don't think Sussex Central belongs in the top 4 in Class 3. Again, no disrespect to anybody on that team. As we say, our job is to give you our thoughts. It's not to, and we try to not demean people. And it's just the reality of what it is. And that's what that showed it to me. Sussex Central, their losses only to a Class 3A team. Their wins if they had won this game, they would have stayed in that top mix for me. But they and so they do, not the top, but they're in that middle of the field in Class 3. If they had lost this game, they would have moved to what I call my playoff fence in Class 3A with no guarantees to get in, but they didn't do that. As I mentioned, for DMA, it was their third away game, their second game downstate. And, if they had beat Sussex Central, they would have skyrocketed up to the top 2A in my book, because I think Sussex Central, I respect John Wells and that team that much. But if they had lost a close game, they would have been in the top mix anyway with that. And that's exactly what they did. So a good win for Sussex Central against a well-coached, obviously, Matt Carey's doing a great job with that DMA squad. They're in games they probably would have lost last year, most likely, based on what we've seen maybe in the last 2 years. And they're gonna win some games before this is over.
Yeah, this was another shocking result for me, if only because of the score and the way the game played out. While you were watching at the Apo game, this was the game I was kind of focused on. And to get this out of the way first, I mean, congratulations to John Wells and Sussex Central. They played well. Kevon Moore-Brittle had a great game. They got a 25-yard field goal from Gonzalez, another good kicker in the state. But for me, the story of this game was DMA. They have now played two of the top, most likely two of the playoff teams in 3A, basically even for 7 out of 8 quarters. I mean, they got blown out in the fourth quarter of the Sally's game, but that wasn't to be unexpected. They have hung around with everybody. The defense they played against Sussex Central was incredible. And remember, they were without their starting quarterback this week. Odell Teal did not play. Their starting quarterback was Ethan Brantley. He threw for 104 yards, but more than that, it was the way he ran the offense. It was the confidence with the intricacies of the running game. And defensively, again, I was just surprised at how big they are. The Denegris kid for DMA is incredible. He's able to get pressure on everybody. He's a big kid, very athletic. I looked at the stats to this game. I actually contacted Coach Carey last night, and I asked for the stats of the team. And they outgained Sussex Central. They had more first downs than Sussex Central. They had a greater third down efficiency than Sussex Central, and they committed 0 penalties. To me, this was and I know we don't do like, it's one of those wins that you rack up in your head and say, oh, we did okay, and that's good enough. Right. This just felt like a great showing for DMA and Matt Carey, and it kind of sends a message to the other Class 2A teams. As you said, they're for real. They really went out of their way. They scheduled 2 top-tier opponents in 2 of the top 3 games. They beat Del Mar last week, which is not easy to do. This was really impressive. And again, Sussex Central, it's a great win for them. They were expected to win the game. They got it. It was an ugly game in terms of offensive output and things like that. But I couldn't, coming out of the game, and I was writing notes to myself, I was just incredibly impressed with what Coach Carey is doing at DMA and his defense. And again, when you're playing without your starting quarterback, which takes away a ton of options, to come out there and put on this performance. And this was in the going down to the wire until that field goal, which was at the very end of the game for Sussex Central. This was very much in doubt.
All right. One play away.
Kudos to Sussex Central for the win, and a big kudos to DMA for hanging in there and showing that they've got a really good team.
All right, DMA, they're 1-2 now, but like you said, both their losses have been to Class 3 teams. They're going to play their first home game, and they're playing against Elkton High School. And even though it's in our backyard up here, I really don't know a lot about them, so not sure what that's going to be. Sussex Central also playing a Maryland team. They'll play South Carroll High School. Again, don't know anything about them, so we're going to move on. All right, before we do, athletes of all ages, unleash your potential with the Win the Day Planner, your key to building winning habits for a lifetime. This planner was put together by a local longtime wrestling coach, Dan Rigby, who led both Cesar Rodney and Milford High School to multiple championship appearances and a combined 3 state titles. He has years of experience working with athletes of all ages and abilities. The key features of the planner are a gratitude-focused approach, task organizing, goal setting, self-reflection space. It's perfect for your 18-week sports season or the newly launched 42-week one that's perfect for the whole year. I also know they're making one specific for wrestling, of course, because that's Dan Rigby's specialty as well. I ordered my son a copy. The thing I like most about it, Marty, is it's his responsibility to use and to use it for whatever he needs to, whether it's the amount of water he drinks when he's studying, how he organizes himself. And I think all of us, you and I are both parents. One of the toughest things for high school kids to do is get themselves organized, especially when they're playing either one sport or multiple sports, practices, and everything else that has to go on. Dan Rigby realized that, put this out. It's being used by a lot of teams around the state and around the region as well. You can get your print or digital copy today at winthedayplanner.com. Again, that's winthedayplanner.com. All right, Marty, let's move to Newark, where they played. The game was sloppy. It was windy, rainy conditions. You and I were watching from the comforts of home, seated back. I had my feet up. I sent you the picture of that. Yep. And I was going to go, and then I thought, why would I go when it's on YouTube? I'd like to go when I can. I always get a better sense of things, but it was just one of those things, I didn't want to go out and stand in the rain, to be honest with you, and it was cold. Newark comes away with a 28-22 win. A lot of people calling this an upset. And I think that's because Archmere was so good last year. They're now 1-2. I'm not going to call it an upset. When I wrote my column for this week, I didn't call it an upset because it was two teams that were 1-1 coming into this game in Class 2. But call it what you want. Marquise Rogers, unbelievable. I know you've got his stats, so I'm going to let you give it to him. But, Jody Russell, they lost last week in a heartbreaker. And he said, we got to clean some things up. And Marquise Rogers told me that as well. We made too many dumb mistakes, dumb penalties, et cetera, et cetera. And they did clean it up. And Newark came away with a hard-fought 28-22 win. And, Marty, I was shocked they played this game. I'd be interested in what the field looks like today and tomorrow. Ooh. And it was one of the reasons in my random thoughts, I'm going to talk about Sunday games. There's a teaser for that as well. But anyway, a great win for Newark, 28-22. Marty, these are two teams I think are going to be on the fence in Class 2 getting into the playoffs. And, fans may disagree with me, but from what I saw, these are two evenly matched teams in Class 2. Newark just happened to come away with a hard-fought win.
I agree 100%. This was an even matchup. I probably would have made Archmere a slight favorite going into this game just because Newark was coming off a tough 14-12 loss to Tower Hill, which it now looks like Tower Hill may be stronger than we thought originally. Right. But I was really impressed with the first. Let me put it this way: first quarter, I was so frustrated because I kept thinking, I kept looking at Coach Russell when they show him on the sideline, and I'm like, oh my God, you got to unleash Marquise Rogers. And he had his game plan. And in the second quarter, guess what? They unleashed Marquise Rogers, and he just went nuts. 267 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. He passed for another touchdown. When this kid, and we saw it and heard it when he was at McCain last year, he's one of the most athletic quarterbacks out there. He can make plays from anywhere on the field. This was just a breakout game for him as the Newark quarterback. He also starts on defense. He had an interception. He had a tipped ball that went right to a teammate for another interception. He blocked a field goal. This kid literally did everything yesterday. And I will say the entire Newark team was great because Archmere for a while was kind of marching up and down the field. And then the defense just decided, okay, we're done with this. And that was the end of it. They kind of stopped Archmere in their tracks. Archmere is clearly a different team without Albero and some of the players that they lost. They're not the powerhouse that they've been the last couple of years. And that's to be expected. That's just the nature of high school football. For Newark, it looked like for the first 2 weeks, they were really trying to figure out Marquise Rogers and the new offense, the new system, and getting in sync with all the players. And it appears that is really starting to happen now. He did a nice job throwing the ball, anticipating where the receivers were going to be. The receivers ran great routes. The running backs did a nice job. The blocking up front was good. It only has to be good enough for Marquise, because if he gets outside of the pocket, he can make things happen because you don't know what he's going to do. So this just felt like a really big win for Coach Russell and Newark, and really big confidence boost for a quarterback who I think needed it to feel like, okay, I'm now in mesh with this team. And it felt like that's how it was when this game ended.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I cover this team closer than any other team because I write for the Newark Post. And, it just, I think, as Jody Russell said, when you get a kid like Marquise Rogers, it's like having something fall into your lap.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that things are going to automatically work the way you would think they would. And so it's taken a couple days for them to figure out it, and for the others to figure out, to still figure out, hey, we've got to all play 110% too. Much like the Appoquinimink situation that you brought up. Sometimes teams figure out, hey, we got to all step up our game because Daniel McConomy is no longer in the backfield. And so Newark has done that. They're 2-1. They're going to go play at Mount Pleasant next week. Mount Pleasant's 1-2, and they've been off this week, so they have that advantage. But that's going to be an interesting game. They're both those teams are on the playoff fence for me, and so it's going to be a big game for both teams. Archmere is going to play at Caravel. I'm not going to comment any further on that. Caravel is by far the best team in Class 2.
They're
and,
loaded.
I've seen everybody play. But again, Archmere's got to go into that game kind of like Appoquinimac's got to go into the Smyrna game. Hey, we got nothing to lose. Nobody expects us to win. Let's go play. Let's go play and have fun. And hey, you run a kickoff back or something like that, and all of a sudden you're in the game and you go from there. So anyway, that's the Newark Archmere game. Indian River 25-14 over Polytech. These were two teams that were undefeated going into this game. They both play, I believe they both play in the same district. They do, in District 2 down south. Not a lot of inter-district games, as I call them. I don't know whether it's intra or inter. I always get that confused. But remember, we talked about in the playoffs, all that counts is really you want to win your district and you're in. And after that, it's the index system in all the classes. So if you win the district, that's your only guarantee to get into the playoffs. And even then, I believe, Marty, you're not the automatic 1 and 2 seed, right? District 1, District 2?
No.
Have they, so that's even going to be indexed out. So every game counts, but your district games count even more if you're trying to win the district for the automatic bid. And so Indian River had a 1-point lead at the half. It was a scoreless third quarter. And then Indian River outscores them 18-8 in the fourth. The win gives Indian River 2 solid wins, plus a big district win, as I mentioned. I think Poly's the second best team in that district, looking at it. That's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so they might be this, and they might be the second best team in all of Class 1A. We don't know that. We're going to, that's going to kind of host it, shake itself out. But this was a big game downstate and a big game for Class 1. That's why we're talking about it.
It was, and this was, this was two teams that had put up great performances. Indian River coming off the win over St. Elizabeth's, who had beaten them 3 times in the last 2 years. Polytech had put up 98 points in their first 2 games. So I was curious to see. I think we talked about it, kind of the immovable force against the irresistible object. And the Indian River came out on top. I mean, Dylan Grice threw a TD pass to Darnell Stokes. Darnell Stokes had a heck of a game. He also returned 2 interceptions for touchdowns. So the defense came up huge for Indian River in this game. Yeah, for Polytech, I think the jury is still out on what Polytech is. This was their first real game against a quality opponent, and they played well. But again, obviously the turnovers killed them. But for Indian River, I think this game really stamped them as the team to beat right now in Class 1. That win over St. Elizabeth's was impressive enough, but then to come out and take down a team that scored 98 points, hold them to 14 points, I was impressed with that. Not a ton of information on this game. Again, I'll make my weekly plea to coaches to please put your scoring stuff and your stats on websites for sports. But impressive for Indian River. So I think Polytech, the jury's out, but for Indian River, they've stamped themselves as the team to beat.
They're 3-0. They're going to host Delmar. They're coming off a thumping at Wilmington Friends on Saturday. And so big game for Delmar. They're 2-2. They don't want to be 2-3. Polytech, it's a rebound game for them. They're going to play First State Military Academy 3-1. Marty, if you had told me FSMA was going to be 3-1 after 4 games, I would have told you you're crazy. But it's going to be a another District 2 battle down there in Class 1. So a big game for both those teams. All right, if you're looking
real quick, if you had FSMA and Polytech as a big game in week 4, I'm like you. Yeah, I would have said you were crazy, but it's a huge game in Class 1.
It is. They're all going for state championships, no matter what class you're in. All right, if you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnston with RE/MAX Associates will help you do it as if it was your own. An award-winning realtor with more than 20 years of experience. She helped my wife and I sell our house 18 years ago, the same house we're in. Every single step of the way, I should say. She helped us sell our old house, buy our new house. We've recommended her to dozens of friends who have all walked away happy with either their purchase or the selling of their house. Whether you're looking to upsize, downsize for yourself or an aging parent or maybe one of your kids, do yourself and reach out to Mary Kate Johnson with RE/MAX Associates. She will make sure that you get the best deal on both ends, whether you're buying or selling. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. You can check out her multiple 5-star reviews on Zillow and read what others have said as well. All right, another game, Marty, we're going to go to that not a big game for a lot of people, but Brandywine and Conrad. Brandywine is now off to a 2-1 start. They came away with a 33-6 win. They were 0-9 last year, 2-7 the year before, and everybody kind of judges everything. We don't count the COVID year, no matter what your record was. And so for Brandywine, head coach Isaiah Mays maybe has turned this program around. If you live in that district now, you're maybe thinking maybe I'll go play for the Bulldogs versus the other teams in the district and maybe even the surrounding private schools, because you get a chance to play and they seem to be on a roll. At least they're 2-1 for the first time in a long time. And so Brandywine with a 33-6 win over Conrad.
Yeah, this was, excuse me, this was impressive. I thought Conrad was going to be one of the teams to beat in 1A. And this was a really surprising result to me, more in the score than anything else. Brandywine has showed some decent stuff the last couple of weeks, but to come out here and put a thumping on Conrad, I thought was huge. To Coach Isaiah Mays, if you're out there listening, I'd love to talk about your team, but you got to send me stats. I emailed him yesterday. I never heard back, and I know sometimes they don't check their emails till the week, but I just want Coach to know we want to talk about the team. So get back to us. But Cameron Campbell had 2 TD runs. Andre Drummond, who's been phenomenal for them, had 3 TDs, 2 receiving, 1 rushing. Krisden Wright had 2 more TD passes, the quarterback. That's now 6 TDs on the season for Drummond and 7 for the quarterback Wright. And his 7th was an interception return for a touchdown against Conrad. So Brandywine's getting it done on both sides of the ball. And it's just, again, we talked about this over the last couple of years with these different classes. It's so much fun to see these programs like FSMA, Polytech, Brandywine coming out and putting on good performances and being in these games from the beginning. And it's fun to see, and it really gets the kids fired up. And as you said, the Brandywine club, we don't know a lot about. I mean, who knows? You look at 1A, and aside from Indian River, who I said stamped themselves as the favorite, you just never know. Anybody could be involved in these things. So this was a surprising result, but a great win for Isaiah Mays and his bunch.
And Marty, just to clarify your request for stats, we know that not every coach puts them in right away, but if you can just give us a heads up, let us know, especially for these games that people are not putting on Twitter, because that's where we rely on getting our information besides the coaches. But if your game wasn't covered and you had somebody that scored 5 touchdowns or whatever it is, let us know. Just shoot us a quick message, either one of us, and just say, hey, this kid had 3 touchdowns. That, that's better than nothing. Because
And I did find out, because we got a note from Pat Gariani's of 302 Sports sent me a note and just said, hey, a lot of these guys are putting them on max preps. And he's right, they are. The difference is max preps doesn't break them out by game. So if you go to a specific game, you get team stats. What you don't get is individual stats. So for the coaches at the end of the season, hey, we can use max preps. That's fine for the all class and all state and all that kind of stuff. But for the in season, Websites for Sports is the place to go. Leave your stats there or send it to John and I, because again, you and I, we love to highlight some of these teams that people don't hear about very often, but we got to get information to do it.
Yeah, and we pick all our awards based on the information we have.
That's right.
And so that's why it's important. All right, Brandywine 2-1. They're going to take their first road trip. They're going to Friends. Friends is 3-0. But it's, this I think obviously going to be a much better game than it would have been last year, but it's going to be a good game. Conrad is now 1-2. They're going to host St. Andrews, also a 1-2 team. So again, if you're on the fence come playoff time, this is a big game for both of these teams.
Agreed. And St. Andrews, early, college high school at Delaware State got their first win last week. St. Andrews thumped them over the weekend, 42-6. So it kind of put them back in their place a little bit, though I'm sure that there's still some confidence down there. But for St. Andrews, it's a great confidence builder going into the game against Conrad.
All right, it is now time for our Grain Gridiron top performers of the week. Hopefully by now you know about Grain Restaurant, started by 2 local businessmen on Main Street in Newark. They've quickly grown into locations in Trolley Square, at the Summit Marina on the C&D Canal, in Lewis at the Ferry Terminal, and in Kennett Square, and their newest location on the Star Campus in Newark. Grain restaurants have become nightly or weekly hangouts for some, gathering spots for special occasions for others, or just a new place to try and usually return to, as I have several times. The menu has something for everyone, some usuals and some peculiars, but best of all, you never leave disappointed or hungry. My favorite part of Grain is knowing that it was started by 2 guys who had an idea, their neighbors. I think they were sitting in their driveway around the fire pit and said, hey, let's start a restaurant together. And it's not only come to fruition, it's flourished. And fortunately, they both love sports and they love supporting the community in a lot of different ways. They're Jim O'Donohue and Lee Michaels, and we thank them for supporting not only the podcast, but high school sports. All right, Marty, our Grain Gridiron top performers, what we do is we sort of have an honor roll, and then we pick the top performer, and the top performer, their head coach, gets a gift card from Grain Restaurants, good at any of the 5 located across the state. And the great thing is, no matter where you live, there's a Grain within half an hour from you that you can go and enjoy the restaurants. And the reason we do that is the DIAA has a regulation that players cannot receive a monetary gift or award. They could a trophy, a T-shirt, something like that. And we're going to kind of look at that next year, how we want to do that.
Yes.
But for this year, it's the head coach who's going to receive the Grain gift card. Marty, I'm going to give you my first, and it was you mentioned it, and it might be actually I won't say it because I think you might have it, but I'm going to go with one of them, honor roll James Campbell from St. Mark's in the 29-0 win over Red Lion. 4 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground, including 2 to his brother Jude. Just an outstanding performance. That game was at Red Lion on a Friday night. Tough place to play. I assume the wind was going there just like it was where I was at Appoquinimink. And so just a very impressive performance by James Campbell, quarterback for St. Mark's.
And I've got 6 of them this week, but I'll just give you one at a time here. I'll start with RJ Matthews. Boy, he lit up Woodbridge, and I, it was almost like the headline writes itself. It took Woodbridge to the woodshed over the weekend. 341 yards and 7 touchdowns. Howard, they were desperate for a win. They had to get a win. Woodbridge was 3-0. Howard was 0-2. This was a huge win for them. I put on Twitter, if you had said that he would throw 7 touchdowns and a 60 burger would be hung up on Woodbridge, I would have said that was crazy on a Marvin Dooley defense, but they did it. Just an incredible performance by RJ Matthews. And I also put on Twitter that he's the reason I'm not counting Howard out by any means in Class 2A. He's a kid that just make a lot of things happen, and he raises the level of the play of his teammates.
All right. So there's 2 of the honor roll. Marty, do you have another one?
I do. I have a little laundry list this week. There were some good performances. Friends, Andrew McKenzie, 208 rushing yards on 32 carries, 6 for 6 passing, 91 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns. He filled in for injured Ryan Tattersall, and we hope there's nothing long-term with Ryan Tattersall, but an incredible performance for a backup quarterback to come in, just did a fantastic job in their blowout win over Delmar. So great job by Andrew McKenzie.
All right, I had BJ Aline from Sally's. You mentioned him, Marty. 163 yards, 2 touchdowns in the 28-12 win over Smyrna. As you said, this kid has kind of become an entirely different player than he was at DMA. Of course, remember, he played at at Sally's his freshman year, transferred to DMA for 2 years, and then transferred back to Sally. So BJ Aline having a great season and a great game in that big win over Smyrna.
My next kid, and he only played in the 4th quarter, I believe, but Jacob Eball from St. Mark's came into the game in the 4th quarter against Red Lion, where St. Mark's was trying to just kind of grind it out and kill the clock. This kid was like a wrecking ball. He ran over and through Red Lion defenders. I think he ended up with something like 50 yards. And I'll be perfectly honest, I had never heard of Jacob Eball until this game. I think we might hear about Jacob Eball later on, because they've got Keegan Barnes. They've got a good running game. They've got a good passing game. But this kid, and again, his name's Jacob Eball, he just ran over and through the Red Lion defense. And I mean, he ran with some angry intent. If anybody ever watches Good Morning Football and watches the Angry Run segment, Jacob Eball had about 7 of them against Red Lion in the 4th quarter. So just a fantastic performance.
And that allowed the passing game to open up. If you got a running back who's running like that, obviously they're going to have to start clogging the middle, and that opens up the outside for James Campbell. All right. Do you have any more?
I have
Marty?
2 more just real quickly. I wanted to get to Cape Henlopen, Markai James, 22 carries, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns in the win over Lake. Lake is shorthanded. They've got some quarterback situations, but still it wraps up Cape's run through the 2A division in their first 3 games, which was an interesting schedule quirk. But my last one was St. Andrews, again, who took down ECHS. Quarterback Frank Nasta, 4 touchdown passes, and he ran for 1. So 5 touchdowns total for Frank Nasta from St. Andrews. So some really great performances this week.
Also want to congratulate Marquis James, number 7, as I call him. Started calling him that last year. He committed to Old Dominion last week.
Yes,
so he'll play football at Old Dominion. So congratulations to him. Just a great young man. All right, so that's going to bring us to our Grain Gridiron Top Performer of the Week, and that award goes to McKeevis Rogers, the quarterback from Newark. 28-22 win over Archmere, as we talked about. He's a 3-way player, as far as I'm concerned, because he had a passing touchdown. He rushed for 260 yards on 32 carries, He had an interception on defense that sealed the win for Newark when Archmere was trying to get into the end zone on the final series of the game. He also blocked a field goal on special teams. So this is the kid. And I'm not sure if he's normally on for punt returns and kick returns. I wasn't paying close enough attention for that, but he certainly does it all. So McKeevis Rogers of Newark High is our Grain Gridiron top performer of the week, and we will award a Grain gift card to head coach Jody Russell as a result of that. So congratulations to McKeevis Rogers of Newark High School.
Yes.
And now it's time for our Diamond Hill top performances. Diamond Hill Incorporated is celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. For 20 years, they've been serving all of Delaware and the surrounding areas in all things construction, from commercial concrete and site development to residential projects. They have you covered. You can email info@diamondhillinc.com for more information. That's info@diamondhillinc.com. The owner, Mike Sheehan, had an outstanding career at St. Elizabeth back in the day, and he wanted to wish all of Delaware's high school athletes good luck this year, and we appreciate the sponsorship of the Diamond Hill top performances. Marty, I'll start this one as it's kind of a continuation of my top performers, and I've got a pair of brothers. And so my first pair of brothers is from St. Mark's, James and Jude Campbell. 2 touchdowns, James throwing to his brother Jude in the 29-0 win over Red Lion. For James, as I just mentioned, he had 4 touchdowns total. So it's neat to see a pair of brothers. And I don't know how much difference the age is. I forgot to look it up, but it doesn't matter. There's 2 brothers playing on the same field, and what a neat thing for the parents. And I'll parlay that into my next top performance. Appoquinimink, the Von Brandt brothers, as you said, a name that we're probably going to say every time we talk about Appoquinimink and their big win over St. George's. Edge is a junior in high school, and he plays at the linebacker position. He had 18 tackles. He's got 44 tackles already in the first 3 games. And Leighton, the other brother, is the big 6'7", 6'8" freshman, and he played on both sides of the line the entire game. Only time he came out is when he was forced to come out because he sprained his ankle, limped off the field, and got right back in there. And so congratulations to the Campbell brothers and the Von Brandt brothers. They are my Diamond Hill top performances of the week.
And every time I hear Edge Von Brandt, I think of a James Bond movie. I think what a cool secret agent name Edge Von Brandt would be. I got to hear that in a movie at some point. I have 2 of them as well. For me, First State Military Academy, the entire team, a come from behind win over Seaford, who a lot of people thought are going to be a contender in 1A, and they are. One caveat, I know, to the Seaford people who are listening out there, Jazante Levon, their top running back and a star, was on a recruiting trip to some small school in Louisiana, I believe, Louisiana State University. They might be pretty good at
they
sports.
Division 2 or 3.
But he was there on a track visit. This is a multi-talented kid, so you can understand that why he made the visit to LSU. But it doesn't change the fact that First State Military, again, faced adversity, had to come from behind, and end up winning the game. I think it was 25-12. Or 25-13, just a great performance. And again, Coach Braxton, boy, there's just something, the formula he's mixing up down there is working. He's got the kids buying in. They're playing so well right now. I love to see it. My second one is the Indian River defense. They were phenomenal against Polytech. They gave up 14 points, but they offset that by scoring 14 points. So they really gave the offense kind of a clean slate to do their thing there. So again, a team that had scored 98 points in the 2 games coming in, IR completely shut them down. So the First State Military team and the IR defense are my Diamond Hill top performers.
All right. Congratulations. And once again, thank you to Diamond Hill Incorporated for sponsoring the Diamond Hill top performances of the week. All right, for the first time, Marty, we're going to dive. Deep's not the right word because I didn't do a whole lot of thinking about this other than I kept it very high level of the top teams that we think are in each class. We're 3 games in, 4 games for other as we're, heading into week 4, even though week 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 means that, we've surpassed 4 weeks in the season. And a lot of teams still have not played outside their district. Either they're playing across their district, they're playing out of class, playing out of state or whatever. But we felt we had enough of a feel. We've seen enough of the teams either in person or on the live streams that we can give some honest opinions about it. And again, we're not, ripping anybody or putting anybody down. We're just doing what people enjoy having us do, which is give our opinions on the world of football. Let's start down in Class 1, Marty. And if I didn't make it clear enough when we were talking about them, I'll reiterate. I think Indian River right now is the clear team at the top of both districts. If I had to bet money on who's going to win Class 1, it would be Indian River. First State Military, you can't eliminate them. They're 3-1 right now. Those two are going to face off on November 10th. So that could be a big game, not only just for fun to watch, but also the winner of that game on November 10th, looking at what I'm looking at, is probably going to clinch District 2, which is the automatic bid. Again, just my thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got Indian River and First State Military. Polytech, I bumped down just a notch, obviously, because they just lost to Indian River, and that's just the reality of it. But I think they're going to be right there, too. 8 teams make the playoffs, and it doesn't matter which district you're in. It matters how you do and how the numbers all stack up. Over in District 1, that's a tough one. I've got your alma mater, St. Elizabeth, which, you know, they struggled at the start. They've picked up a win. They lost to Indian River, which is why I don't have them at the top with Indian River. You know, I've kind of separated them automatically. And then you look at the others. AI has yet to win. Christiana beat AI in their only win. Dickinson I don't think they've won yet either. Glasgow has no wins. And Tatnall just isn't going to be one of those top teams, I don't think. And so, you know, when I'm looking at Class 1, I'm looking, if I'm betting on Indian River. But I haven't eliminated First State. I haven't eliminated Polytech, haven't eliminated Charter, St. E's, a couple other schools. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know me, I did dive in once you suggested this. So I did actual, and I wasn't sure I was going to do this, but I did an actual ranking of my top 4 in Class 1, each of the 4 classes. And for me, at 4 right now, I've got First State Military Academy. They look good. I understand they still have some big games left. And again, this is based on the games the teams have played and what I think they've done. At number 3, I have Tatnall. I think Brendan Ironton's got something going there. They've won 2 in a row now, including the Cannon game last week. Rashawn Lamons is a great running back. I think they're going to be a factor in this. And number 2, I got St. E. They've been top of the heap for the last 2 years next to Laurel. They've been always the bridesmaid, never the bride the last 2 years to Laurel. And then at number 1, of course, Indian River, which I think is just a clear favorite right now. Until somebody beats them, they're going to stay at number 1 for me. And I agree. District 1, it's tough. District 1 is rough this year. There's not a lot of wins in there. And District 2 is just clearly the best district this season so far. Right. But yeah, those are my top four in order so far through, whatever, 2-3 weeks based on how many games the teams have played.
All right, let's go to District 2. And Marty, I looked at these teams, and I don't have anybody out of the playoffs. Like you said, I mean, there's not one team that I look there and say, well, there's no way they're making they're not, that they're making the playoffs. And so that's just the reality of it. I've got Caravel head and shoulders above everybody else, just from what I've seen. I've seen them live. I've seen them on tape. I have not seen DMA live. I watched a little bit on tape. I have them just a notch under Caravel, and I'd probably put Laurel right under there too, even though they just, they've lost to Caravel. So I'd have Laurel right under there as well. But when I look at these other teams, Marty, Archmere wouldn't be in the top echelon, but I still think they can make the playoffs. I think Howard, again, not in the echelon, could make the playoffs. I'm in District 2 now. Odessa, I watched live. They're big, Marty, and they're fast. I mean, they look like a team that, could bump up to Class 3 next year. They won't, because it's a 2-year cycle, but that's how big, and they've got a big roster. Mount Pleasant, not out of it. Tower Hill, Friends, that, so there's just, like, there's no other way to say it than, like you said, Class 2, there's a lot of parity. Yep. And while there's a couple teams that have separated themselves, what's going to be fun is that I don't think anybody's going to be eliminated from the playoffs until weeks 8, 9, or 10, unlike in some of the other conference and in the other 2 classes. And so I think that's kind of fun. But I've got Caravel at the top. If I had to pick a Final Four, I'd probably pick Caravel, DMA, Laurel, and it's tough after that. I want to say Wilmington Friends because they look good, but they haven't played a great schedule. I was impressed against Delmar. Delmar's a legitimate team, whatever the record is. They're always a legitimate team. So I'm going to say if I had to pick a 4, and this isn't in any order other than Caravel's at 1, my other 3 would be DMA, Laurel, and Wilmington Friends. Lake would have been, but they've got that quarterback situation where they lost their starting quarterback, unfortunately, at the beginning of the season. So my 4 would be Caravel, DMA, Wilmington Friends, and Laurel if I had to pick a Final 4.
Now, in my 4, for number 4, this was kind of a toss-up for me, but I'm going to go a little upset special here. I went with Sussex Tech. Sussex Tech is quietly 3-0. I've seen two of their games on YouTube. They look really good at times, and I think they may be a sneaky team to fit in there toward the end of the
Hmm.
season. At number 3, I have DMA. The only reason I'm at 3 is because they do have the 2 losses, but they look extremely good, and I can't wait to see them play some of these better 2A teams to see where they are. At number 2, I have Friends, and I'll tell you why. Yesterday or this weekend did it for me. The fact that Tattersall was knocked out and couldn't play, and the backup quarterback McKenzie came in, um, and put up a huge game against a good, a solid Delmar team.
Right.
Had me keep Friends at 2 for the moment, and of course, just there is a monster gap between 2 and 1 for me at this point in the season because Caravel they just don't appear to have a weakness right now. The offense is clicking, the running game. Tristan Awerda, the quarterback, is very efficient, and the defense is really strong. Of course, we've seen what Hamilton can do on the punt returns, so their special teams is strong as well. So yeah, I've got Sussex Tech, DMA, Friends, and Caravel as my top 4 through the early portion of the season.
All right, so we'll see how that ends up working out. All right, let's go to Class 3A. My top 4 in no particular order: Middletown, Sally's, Dover, and Smyrna. And then I think Apo, Hodson, St. Mark, Caesarani, Cape Henlopen, St. George's, and Sussex Central. And William Penn. It's a toss-up who's getting into playoffs. Yep. And, a lot of people would say, well, how can you pick Caesarani? And I say, well, they still got 7 games to play. And from what I've seen, they played a close game against William Penn and ended up being close. And William Penn's 3-0. And we're going to find out more about William Penn this week when they play St. George. And so I still think there's an opportunity that even a team that only has 0 or 1 wins right now, Marty, could end up with 4 wins, and that might get them in that Class 3, right. Depending on how everything shakes out with points, the point system and all that. Yep. So, but my top 4 are Middletown, Sally's, Dover, and Smyrna. If you forced me to pick a number 1 right now, I wouldn't do it because I haven't seen Middletown play, first of all. And I just think I've seen Dover play. I was super, super, super impressed with them. Yep. I'm going to see Smyrna play in person on Friday night when they play Apo, and we'll have a better feel for them. And so it's not fair for me to pick a number 1. So I'm not going to. You've seen more games than I have because you watch them on the streams. I go to the Apo game and that eliminates me from watching 8 other games that night. But it's not fair for me to pick a number 1. But Middletown, Sally's, Dover, and Smyrna, I would bet a significant amount of money that they will be in the Final 4, unless, of course, the number system, and that's the thing here, Marty, with Smyrna starting out 0-3, they may be the second best team in the state, maybe the first, but not have the number 1 ranking because they've got 3 losses, where Middletown's got 2 wins and a loss, and Sally's is 3-0, and Dover is 3-0 because they play some out-of-state teams. So that's where it kind of makes it quirky, where you could have the best 2 teams playing in the semifinals. But what I'm more confident about than I've been ever since let's say since COVID, since they went to this system, is that no matter of those 4 teams I just mentioned, as long as 2 of them are in the finals, as of right now, as it stands, I think it will be a great game. Now, if one of those teams loses their starting quarterback or their starting running back or something like that, that changes the outlook. But I would right now, I'd say I'd love to have those 4 teams in the semis. I don't care who's playing who. And then the 2 teams go to the championship. Yes. I think it would be a great championship.
I agree.
And that's not eliminating the other 8 people in the other 8 teams in the class. It's just the way it is. That's just reality of the situation right now in Class 3.
I'm going to have a little fun with some colleagues of ours at Delmarva Sports Network. Despite them having Smyrna ranked 14th in the Henlopen Conference standings, I'm going to make Smyrna my number 4 team in 3A. And if anybody wants to go on Twitter, DSN does this ranking of the teams, but they do it really based on wins and losses. And Smyrna, obviously at 0-3, was ranked behind Early College High School in their most recent power rankings, which a lot of us who do this kind of stuff on a weekly basis got a real kick out of. But anyway, it's rankings are always fun, and they're basically done to create what we're doing right now is talking about them,
right? We're talking about those.
So if you want to check out Delmarva Sports Network's rankings, go to their site and check them out. And they do, by the way, they do a phenomenal job covering sports in Delaware as well, just like 302.
No doubt.
So I have Smyrna as number 4. And that's only because they're 0-3. I fully expect they may be in the top 2, if not the top 1, by the end of the season. At 3, I have Salesianum. I've been so impressed with what Gene has done early on in his tenure. It's so tough to come in with a new system, all new coaches, basically, and do what they've done, and to take an early season game against Smyrna and do what they've done in that game, especially defensively, very impressed.
Yep.
Number 2, I have Middletown. Austin Troyer, I'm amazed this kid doesn't have a commitment somewhere yet. He can hit every throw you can think of. They've got a good defense. They've got good special teams. They're solid all around. They're very good all around. They went down to Washington High School in Ohio this week and took it on the chin, which they usually do early in the season. They've played IMG a couple times. They lost 41-7. But those games seem to be much more about the experience and the team bonding, which they love, and that's great. I actually kind of came around on some of these games after we talked to one of the Middletown coaches.
Right.
And number 1, I have Dover. I just think that the three-headed weapon on the offensive side with Cosme, Parker, and Kilby, they're loaded, and their defense is strong this year, and they're motivated. Remember, they played the championship game without Jaquan Kilby last year. They were blown out by Smyrna, which probably would have happened anyway. Score may have been a little bit closer, but it was a huge confidence deflator, if you will, going into that championship game without their top weapon. So I think Dover right now, based on early season results, would be my top in 3A.
And I saw them play against Apo, and I came away as impressed with any team offensively that I've seen since I started covering high school football. They did the hurry up offense. And when I say hurry up, they didn't just run to the line and then wait 40 seconds.
No,
they ran to the line and hiked the ball. And I think Chip Knapp's strategy is perfect. He says, we don't have 100 plays on offense. We have a handful, and we perfect them. And once we've perfected them, then we add another one.
I love that.
And I think, and I tell you, that's how the offense looked. It was click, 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 click. Yep. The only time it didn't work is when a kid dropped the pass. The play worked, just a kid didn't come through with the skill part of it. And
it's funny, you mentioned the hurry up. That drives me crazy when announcers say they're in a hurry up offense. They get to the line and then they take 20 seconds to get the signal in, move guys around. I love that Dover gets up there and bang, snaps the ball. Yeah. Right. It reminds me of Colorado, even though they got blown out this week.
Yep.
Colorado and Oregon were doing the same thing back and forth. You get up to the line, bang, you snap the ball, you try to catch the defense off guard. So I love that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to just say one more thing about the DSN, the Delmarva Sports Network rankings. That what they do, for those who don't understand rankings, the guys like Sean Green, the 302 guys, Brad Myers, the Delaware State News guys, they're local guys. They follow it like we do. They understand that you can't put early college, high school in front of Smyrna just because of their record. Down at DSN, they're juggling the broadcasts are phenomenal. They have the big truck that pulls up. I mean, it looks like ESPN's at your place when they come, and they do a great job. The broadcasters are great. And so we can't say enough about what they're trying to do, but they're doing it for every fall sport. And they don't have time to look at stuff like we look at it. So here's what I'm going to offer to DSN. We would love to be your ranking system, the Delaware High School Football Pod. If you are interested, we will do your power rankings or your rankings. And that's what they'll be. They'll be our opinions on, just as we just gave you, who we think maybe and we're not going to do all 16 teams or 12, whatever there is. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do the top 6 or whatever. We can come to an agreement. But if you are interested, if anybody from Delmarva Sports Network is interested, we'd be happy to give the local flavor to what we think the ranking should be. We know you don't have time to invest in figuring that out. We already have it figured out. Our opinions, we have it figured out. And that's all it is. It's an opinion. That's what Brad Myers is. That's what Sean Green's is. That's what Andy Walters is. And the 302 guys. It's opinions. And that's all it is. And that's why we have fun with it. We would be happy to do yours, Delmarva Sports Network. Reach out to us if you're interested. All right, on to previewing week 4, which is the 5th week in Delaware high school football. Let's start with, and we're going to just kind of quickly go through these. Hodson 2-1 at Cape 3-0. Hodson was off this past week. They have wins over Howard and St. George's. Their losses to a Caravel team, which we think would be in the playoffs in Class 3. At least I think that.
Agreed.
Cape has 3 wins, all against Class 2A teams, and they needed a goal line stance to beat Red Lion at home. Both of these teams are in the playoff mix, but Marty, they're on the fence. They're on that fence for me. So a big game for both teams. It's down at Cape Henlopen on Friday night, a tough place to play.
Agreed. And I think that the games that we've come up with to preview this week, they're all, I think you mentioned earlier, they're all gauge games.
Yep.
For Hodson, we're going to find out where they fit in after the win over St. George's. For Cape, we're going to find out where they stand in 3A because they haven't played a 3A team yet.
Right.
So this is the first time we're going to see Coach Frederick's team against Coach Collins' team. And, it's a big game for both teams for playoff positioning. One of these teams is going to come out in great shape in terms of their district. Or their overall standings. For Cape, again, because of the 3 games against the 2A, we just don't know anything about them.
Right.
So this will be a great opportunity to see what Cape has.
All right, the other one, one of the others, Apo at Smyrna. Apo 2-1, a nice win over St. George's. Smyrna 0-3. We talked about it. They're going to be home for the first time. For Apo, Marty, I think it's a chance to redeem themselves from the Dover loss and prove that they can play with the big guys, or the big 4, as I call them. Doesn't mean they have to beat Smyrna. It means they can't get blown out like they did against Dover. And so it's a tough task for Appoquinimink. Smyrna's a tough place to play. As we've said, it's going to be a sea of red. That place will be packed, especially if the weather's decent. It's just going to be a tough place to play. They've got to go into it with we have nothing to lose except the game. Let's go in and try to sneak out a win here. But I think that's going to tell me, and it's going to tell Apo, can we play with the big boys like we did last year? Can we do that this year? Because Smyrna, even at 0-3 to me, until it's proven otherwise, is one of the big boys. Now, if Apo goes in and beats Smyrna, then we're going to have a new conversation about maybe the top 4 next week, just because that'll be the way it is. So it's a good gauge game for Appoquinimink, but it's also a good gauge game for Smyrna, because I don't think anybody in Smyrna thought they were going to lose to Sally's last week, if they were honest with you.
No, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth. If Apo were to come away here, it would say a ton about both teams. It's come away with a win. For Smyrna, this is a monster game for them from a confidence standpoint and a record standpoint. They can't go 0-4. I mean,
No.
At some point you start to get into dangerous territory
Right,
here. But for Smyrna, they're going to come out fired up. They're 0-3. No one thought they're going to be 0-3. I'm sure every one of those kids, every one of those coaches thought they were going to go to Sally's and win that game. It didn't happen. So now they got to kind of go back to the drawing board. I'm curious to see what adjustments they're going to make. Last year, every adjustment they made seemed to click, and they really turned it around after a slow start. So very curious to see what they do here. And for Apo, a great opportunity, as you said, to gauge where they fit in the big picture with the Dover, the Smyrna, the Sally's teams. Can they go down there without a run DMC on the team and still put up a good performance? They're going to throw the ball. We know they're going to have to throw the ball. Right. Jaden Glover is going to have a big game to keep the pressure off of the quarterback. So this is going to be a really fascinating game to watch.
All right, another game to watch, it would be the one game I would go to if I could, is Sally's at Dover. 2 undefeated teams, 2 of our top 4 teams, 2 very good quarterbacks in Nasim Kazmi of Dover, Ryan Stower of Sally's, 2 very good running backs, Jaquan Kilby and BJ Aline. Let me get rid of the word good. Great running backs, Jaquan Kilby and BJ Aline. Sally's has a top 4 win against Smyrna. Dover could make this their first.
Yeah, this is the game of the week on paper anyway. And again, a gauge game. Sally's is coming off a huge win over Smyrna. Dover saw that. They're going to want to say, you know what, we'll see your win over Smyrna and we'll beat you. The crowd down there is going to be great. It should be a phenomenal atmosphere. Sally's and Gene Deladon with his staff, they're going to be 100% prepared. I'm really curious to see how this plays out. But the 3-headed monster on offense for Dover is something that the Sally's defense is going to have to deal with. And it's going to be something they haven't really seen this season in terms of the overall talent on the offensive side. So I'm really curious to see how Sally's defense performs here.
Another gauge game downstate in District 2, or Class 2, I should say. Howard and Lake Forest. Howard's 1-2. Lake Forest is 2-2. Lake has a win and a loss against Class 3 teams, and they have a win and a loss against Class 2 teams. Howard, of course, picking up their first win this past week. And Marty, it's going to tell us a lot about both these teams in terms of whether they belong in that upper part of the playoff picture or on the fence.
It is. I'm hoping Jack Parsons is back for Lake Forest behind center, replacing again Jonathan Tyndall. They've had the 49ers problem in the NFC Championship game last year where they're running out of quarterbacks. Excuse me. For Howard to go down there, make that trip and come away with a win. would be phenomenal. I think they are going to be coming in there with a busload of confidence after the performance they put up against an undefeated Woodbridge team. So this is, again, all the games that we've looked at are gauge games. Howard, I think Howard's got to be the favorite on paper going down there because of the issues with personnel that Lake has had, but you never know if they get it back together. Jameer Snell's a phenomenal athlete down there. They've got good players on both sides of the ball. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
All right. William Penn at St. George's on Saturday. William Penn undefeated. St. George's 1-2. Marty, I think St. George's has been a little bit more tested than William Penn has.
Yep.
And I think the William Penn coaching staff would agree with me. The Colonials were off this week. Their wins are against Caesar Rodney, a weak Pennsylvania team from what we understand, and Milford, a Class 2 team. St. George's, their win has been against St. Mark's, and then their losses to Hodson and Appo. Cam Montgomery, the running back, is going to be a game time decision, spraining his ankle late in the Appoquinimink game. These teams are both well coached. John Wilson and Matt, his last name's Sable, Matt Sable.
Yep.
And they're on my playoff fence in 3A. So as we've said a couple times, it's one of those games. The team that makes the playoffs can say that was a key win. The team that doesn't could say, might be able to say, or might have to say, we should have won that game and we'd be in.
Right. This feels like, in the first 3 years of the 3A, the new class realignment, it feels like William Penn St. George's always feels like an elimination game. One of the teams gets in and one of the teams doesn't.
Right.
Again, St. George's goes to the semifinals last year. Surprisingly, they upset top-seeded Appo in the first round. They've got to get things figured out with the passing game. I think they got Donovan Brooks for the last couple of years, did a phenomenal job under center for them. The new quarterback still trying to figure things out. William Penn, I tell you what, I watched the William Penn Milford game and it just kind of opened my eyes. William Penn's defense was incredible. And they kind of showed some of the stuff they showed in the game one against Caesar Rodney. They got off to a big lead and then gave up a lot of points in the end. But I really think William Penn, sneaky 3-0 right now, but 40-0 win over Milford, I didn't see coming. Jed Bell does a great job. Is getting the kids going down there at Milford, and they just couldn't do anything against that William Penn defense. So really curious to see how St. George's progresses offensively, and if William Penn comes out with a defensive effort that they've shown the first 3 games, St. George's could be in trouble.
All right, so those are our week 4 previews. I want to tell you which ones are going to be streamed live. Delmarva Sports Network, we put an ask out to them. They told us they would get back to us. They haven't. So if you did send it to us, we didn't get it. So please send us your streaming schedule so we can let viewers know. On Friday, Archmere at Caravel, and these are all going to be streamed by Delaware Live Sports, powered by 302. So it'll be Archmere at Caravel, Sally's at Dover, and Concord at Milford. So those are the 3 games that will be streamed on Friday night. On Saturday, Delaware Live Sports will stream the Newark at Mount Pleasant game, and WDEL, Sean Green will have the William Penn at St. George's game on the radio if you want to listen to that. That's WDEL, and they have an AM and an FM station there. So those are the games coming up. It's going to be an exciting week, Marty, much like, I kind of feel like we had a great games this past week. We're going to have even better games next week as things really start to get narrowed down to where the best teams are. So, all right, it is now time for our Martuscelli Restaurant Group trivia question. The Martuscelli Restaurant Group owns the Chesapeake Inn, Klondike Kate's, and La Casa Pasta. All 3 restaurants are known for their delectable dishes, cozy ambiance, and exceptional service. And thanks to the Martuscelli Group, one lucky listener each week gets to eat out at one of them for free. You can enjoy signature crab cakes and other fresh seafood at the Chesapeake Inn, homemade pastas and seafood specialties at La Casa Pasta, or Klondike Kate's famous cheesesteak, egg rolls, and nachos. We can't thank the Martuscelli Group enough for supporting our podcast and, in turn, supporting high school football here in Delaware. So, Marty, winner from last week and this week's trivia question. The show is yours.
Last week's trivia question, of course, was who was the quarterback for Sally's in their 76-56 win over Smyrna in 2015 that sort of started the Smyrna legend. And he did not appear in the championship game. The answer was Garrett Cannon, who unfortunately against Middletown in the semifinals had his leg broken, and that's the reason he did not play in the finals.
I was at that
Garrett
game.
Cannon. That's right.
I was on the sideline.
Yep. I believe we were texting during that game at the time.
We were.
And the winner was, believe it or not, Deanna Tiberi, who is Jacob Tiberi's mom. So things going every which way down there for the Tiberis. Things are, he's playing well at quarterback, and his mom wins the trivia contest. So we'll be sending her a grain gift card. This week, because I had Dover ranked as my #1 team in 3A, I decided to go back into the archives and go to the last time Dover was your state champion, which was 1988. Quite a while. I was surprised to remember that it was so far back, and it was 11 years since their last title, which they won in 1977. So in 1988, Dover goes to the championship game. They play Salesianum. Salesianum is the favorite going in. Dover wins in overtime, 20-13. The quarterback for Dover is Josh Bushweller. He throws an 8-yard touchdown pass in overtime after they had stopped Nelson Brockenborough on 4th and inches on Sally's first possession. To get a grain gift card, and the question this week, is who did he throw the pass to? Again, Josh Bushweller throws an 8-yard touchdown pass to win the game in overtime. Who was on the receiving end of that pass that gave Dover its state title in 1988? To give us the answer, email us at delhsfootball@gmail.com. That's delhsfootball@gmail.com, or direct message John or I. Don't put it on social media. We don't want to have the answer given away to a ton of people. We're averaging about 7, 8, 9 answers a week. I believe we've got one wrong answer each week. I love that people are participating in this, so please keep it up. But there's your chance to win a grain gift card to any of their a Martuscelli group gift card. I apologize for that. To any of their 3 restaurants: Klondike Kate's, La Casa Pasta, and of course the Chesapeake Inn.
Alrighty, so that is the Martuscelli Restaurant Group trivia question of the week. Dover Senators, the floor is yours. All right, before we give you our random thoughts, we want to thank you again to Websites for Sports. That's websites, 4sports.com, our title sponsor for the podcast. Thanks to Brian Rutter for supporting Delaware athletics in so many ways, all the sports, not just high school. It's your one-stop shop for the schedules, coaching staffs, rosters, etc. That's websites, 4sports.com. All right, Marty, it's time for our random thought segment where we just give our thoughts on any sport, any topic, whatever it is around the world, in Delaware, whatever. I'm going to start. I'll start with mine, and then I'll let you close out the show. Mine has to do with the weather. This week with Ophelia, and Ophelia is still with us on Sunday, but it's not nearly as bad as it was, at least not yet, yesterday. And we had, I think it was ended up being 5 games that were played yesterday, starting with Newark Archmere. And I think the Woodbridge Delmar game was the last game to finish yesterday afternoon, maybe the Howard game, I'm not sure. I was told by several people the reason those games were played, one of the primary reasons, is because the DIAA does not want teams playing on Sunday unless it's a very, very extreme circumstance. It may even be a rule that they can't. I don't know the answer to that question, and I will find out. I came up with this random thought yesterday, and I didn't want to bother anybody from the DIAA for the answer to that question. Monday, Yom Kippur. So that means basically if you're not playing Saturday, you're not playing Sunday, you can't play Monday, which you shouldn't. It's, it's like the Christians' Christmas Day, and you wouldn't be playing on Christmas Day. Then it's Tuesday, and then you get real close to your game next week. And for safety reasons, the number of space in between. So, the bottom line is, Marty, Sunday used to be sacred. You didn't do anything on Sunday except go to church. And if you didn't go to church, you didn't have any activities. It was just kind of a rule of thumb. Well, folks, we're well past that. Today, as we're recording, there are games going on in I don't want to say public school gyms, but up at Spooky Nook. There's 100 teams up there competing in some sport or multiple sports. Same thing with every other sports complex. The reality of it is, and it used to be, well, we'll schedule it Sunday after 12 noon. That's out the window as well. Those Spooky Nook games kicked off this morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I guarantee you, because I've been up there at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning with my son. And so that's just the reality of it. So when you have a situation, and like I said, I don't know what Newark's field's going to look like. It's a grass field. Different for Howard. They were playing on turf. So the field's going to be fine. But there could have been safety issues. It was windy. You don't know what's flying around the state. The bottom line is, in this day and age, if something happens to somebody in a weather situation, there's going to be a lawsuit somewhere. And so why take that risk? Let the kids play on Sunday. And you know what somebody will say? Well, somebody could have had plans on Sunday, but you know what? That's too bad. And, when you get into sport, as my wife and I say, our son Riley plays sports the whole year. When August 15th hits, we're committed to sports. And every decision we make about activities is, well, he might have a game or he might have practice. We don't take weekend long trips during the school year. We can't. And that's the reality of it. And we're happy not to, because we want our son playing sports. Our other son plays in the band and hopes to play golf. So same situation. Band practices more than high school sports do. And so that's just the reality of what you get into. And yes, if you played on a Sunday, there might be a player who has to miss the game because their brother's getting married or something like that. And that's okay. It's high school sports. It's okay to miss a game. And don't tell me, well, it might be a star player. We've got 3 star players who aren't playing this season now because they got hurt. And what you don't want is you don't want to lose a star player in a situation of a weather situation, a bad field situation, or whatever. And thankfully, we haven't heard of anybody who did yesterday, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And it can happen on a perfect night. Let's not pretend that couldn't be the case. My point is, let's give the schools some flexibility to be able to play on Sunday and not be criticized for it, because there would be criticisms for it. There would be parents, if we scheduled a game on Sunday, that's a church day, my kid's not playing. And you know what? That's okay.
That's okay.
But understand, the game's going to go on, because the game is more important than the individual. And so that's just the reality of it. 30 years ago, it was different. When you and I were kids, it was different. There were no games on Sundays. There were no practices on Sundays. Let's fast forward to 2023 and make that change. Marty, your turn.
And I agree with everything you said, by the way. Mine is kind of the same way. It deals with criticisms, and it's kind of, I'll put it under the term of media bias. And this season, for the first time, I've gotten DMs from some folks asking why we don't cover this team more or that team more. A couple weeks ago, Mike Lang came under fire from some school officials for his coverage of their team, which I still am scratching my head over. Anybody who knows Mike Lang knows he covers everyone equally as well. The guy's working 7 days a week covering the sports, and it just drove me nuts that people were criticizing him for how he covered one team. But we've gotten it. I'm sure Sean Green has gotten it at times. I'm sure Brad Myers gets it, because I see it in the comments to some of his stories and his posts sometimes. But we're all doing the best we can with the information that we have, and that's what people need to understand. If you think your team's not being covered enough, first start with the team itself. First of all, how good are they? Because we are going to cover the top teams most likely. Second is, make sure your coach is communicating with the media outlets and getting them information. There are times like today, and again, I'm not criticizing Isaiah Mays at all, because my belief is he didn't see the email yet, which is totally believable. Because we wanted to talk about Brandywine today, but we just don't have the information to do it. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that the people who get upset about who we cover and why we cover them, the reasons could be myriad, but keep in mind, we're trying to cover as many teams as we can. Last week, our Green Gridiron top performer was Joshua Devonish from Early College High School. And if you had told me before the season that ECHS would have one of our players of the week, I would have said you're probably crazy. We're covering everyone, from First State Military to the teams in the old Henlope and South, to Salesianum and Middletown, and we're trying to do the best we can. And I guess the message is just that: make sure your coach is getting the information out there. If we find it and we're able to access it, or they can get it to us, we'll cover the teams. We cover, and you and I think people don't understand, and I'll put Sean Green and Brad Myers in this boat, and the 302 guys and the DSN guys as well. The stuff you don't see behind the scenes is how much research we put into this stuff during the week, the tape we watch of teams, going back and watching a YouTube game because we watched another game at that time. So there's a lot that goes into it. The bottom line is, and this is not whining at all, just we're trying the best we can to cover as many teams as we can, given the time constraints of a podcast. And as much information as you can send us. And there's some coaches who sent me some information this week that we couldn't use because it just didn't fit into what we were doing this week. But we take everything, we read everything, we use it to determine our players of the week, and we appreciate everyone that participates. I'll say there are guys like Brendan Ireton of Tatnall, Avery McMullen at McCain, Gene Deladon at Salesianum. These guys, Dover, has started. They're killing us with information, which we love.
Right.
Give us as much as you got, and we'll just go through it and find out what we need and what we can use. But to everyone who's sending us stuff, it's greatly appreciated. To everyone who's not, get on board. We want to hear the information. We want to hear about your best players. We want to hear about what happened during the game, and we'll do as best we can to cover it.
And again, to the parents, you can't control what the coaches do. We understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a shout out to, tell us, hey, you might want to check out this kid, because sometimes what happens, we have cell phones of a lot of coaches, and we have ways to get them, but we're not going to hound them for stuff, because that's not fair to them. We ask for it. We hope they get it to us, and some do and some don't. And some, that's just the reality of it.
That's a great point, by the way.
But if you're a parent or even just a fan and somebody had a great game, don't assume we're going to find out about it. Get it to us. And we don't need exact stats. Hey, this kid had 4 touchdowns in this game, and we'll take it from there. And it might just be, we may not get any exact information other than we know this kid got 4 touchdowns. And if it fits in, like Marty said, we can't always fit every stat we get and every kid we get. We try to do the best we can and as much as we can. But if it fits in, we'll mention it, that, hey, we heard from a parent, this kid had 4 touchdowns. That's great. And so, sometimes parents can help us do that, or players. If you're a player listening to this and you're not sure your coach gets us the information, it's not bragging. It's giving us the information we want.
100%.
We want to hear the bragging. We don't care if you're the parent and you're telling us about your kid. If it's good stuff, we want to hear it.
Yep.
Because that's how we get the information. That's how we get it out. We're doing this because we love to do it, and we love to give kids and coaches and teams as much publicity as they can. So,
there you go.
So be the way that we get the information. Parents, fans, players, you can be part of that as well. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Special thanks to our sponsors, Grain Restaurant, the Martuscelli Restaurant Group, Diamond Hill Incorporated, Mary Kate Johnson with Remax Associates, and Dan Rigby, author of the Win of the Day Planner, and of course our presenting sponsor, websitesforsports.com. That's websites, the number 4, sports.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. And please like and share our podcast to help us spread the word about the wonderful sport of high school football here in Delaware. Until next time, for Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.